When I see you dancing, I'm like, hola, 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 hola. With your move fancy, make me wanna hola, 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 hola. I got your attention, spending that moolah, 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 moolah. I'm a drop popping pocket, swolla, 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 swolla.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristadoulou.
Swolla, 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 swolla.
I just realized I'm muted. Well, let's get the show started, shall we? It is May 24th, 2021. My name is Ethan Haristadoulou, and we are going to be talking about, not a whole bunch of things. There's not really a whole bunch going on. It's been about a week since we got this whole thing, since we've been gone. So a few newsworthy things going on, some big stuff about Julio Jones, Aaron Rodgers thing to make note of, some injury things here and there in the league, but there's really not a ton of news that we're going to be talking about. We are going to be breaking down the Green Bay Packers in their draft grade, so we'll be going over that. I've obviously been gone for the last week, had a lot going on. We're supposed to change internet services last week. That didn't work out. Lost my cat for a couple days. Ended up finding him. Gravy's sitting right behind me, so that's all settled and done. So let's kind of just jump into things, shall we? As always, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Help promote, the stream that we're doing here. This is kind of just a side project for me. I do this basically as a portfolio. I'm trying to get into the radio business, so any support so I can use this as kind of like this is what I've done. I greatly appreciate it. Now, we're going to kick things off with first the question of the day, that being the topic of discussion in the NFL is basically, where is Julio Jones going to go? It seems like at this point we have come to the crossroads of, is Julio Jones going to be in Atlanta next year or is he not? The big news story that came out just this past, I want to say, was it today actually? Well, this has kind of been like leaking here and there, but the big stuff that came out today, Julio Jones got a phone call from Shannon Sharpe on the Undisputed show on Fox Sports 1. Shannon Sharpe just straight up picked up the phone, called him on live television. A lot of people are discussing whether, or not he actually knew he was on live TV. I'm very curious. They didn't make mention of it to him while he was talking to him. So kind of a weird situation to see, but it was ultimately, it dropped a huge thing for news. He first up said that I'm out of there to the question of whether Shannon Sharpe asking him whether or not he would be there in Atlanta, and then ultimately went on to say that I want to go to a winner in response to Shannon Sharpe saying he should not be going to the Cowboys. So kind of a little bit of a slight to the Cowboys there. Some interesting stuff. Again, the big conversation is, did Julio Jones even know he was actually on the phone? Who knows? I don't really think that's that important. The big things here is that it sounds like Julio Jones is is kind of at the point where he understands he's probably not going to be back in Atlanta next year. There's a lot that's come out on this whole thing. Ian Rappaport tweeted a little bit after the whole news story kind of broke that the All-Pro requested a trade from the organization a few months ago, sources say, and the team then agreed to listen to offers. And that's how it began and why it continues now today. So it's reported that the Falcons are asking for a first-round pick for Julio Jones. That's kind of what they've been looking for. The general assumption is that they put out feelers probably around like the Monday before the draft. This is why this story has kind of been spinning more and more and more as we've gone through the last couple of weeks. It was kind of a really big topic of conversation leading into the draft, and it's kind of only picking up credence now. For those of you that do not know, there's a pretty solid out post June 1st for the Falcons to kind of get out of. The Falcons will be on hook for, I forget what the number is exactly. I think it's like $7 million, about $7 million or so worth of dead money should they trade Julio Jones. Wherever he goes, the salary cap number is going to be about $15.3 million. So a team needs to have draft capital, be okay with that nagging hamstring injury that Julio had all of last season, and on top of that, be willing to trade for a receiver that's already past the age of 30. He's 32 now, so he's only getting older. Nobody really knows if his best receivers are behind him. I mean, up until this past season, Julio Jones was putting up 1,000-yard seasons every single year. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility for him to move somewhere. It's just there's going to have to be a lot that goes on for him to be moved around, in my opinion, just because of age, the injuries that happened last year, how big his contract actually is. I was having a discussion with about this with somebody earlier, and the way I see it is, it's a tough sell to try to ask for a first rounder for one, a wide receiver, and for two, an aging wide receiver. And on top of that, the way the NFL has kind of like segued and turned, we're getting guys that are coming right out of college ready to produce some big numbers. I mean, you look at what Justin Jefferson did last year. He had 1,400 yards his rookie season. Like that, he did better than Julio Jones did last season. So, I mean, obviously he's not the player that Julio Jones is. A lot of people look at Jones as like the guy. He's the best wide receiver in the league, and that is a fair argument. That's not something I'm going to argue, certainly. I'm amongst the group that people that would say that, give me Julio Jones when he's healthy any day of the week. But, with the way that wide receivers seem to be coming out of college these days, just NFL ready and ready to roll, I have a hard time believing that anyone's going to just be willing to part ways with a first-round pick and take that $15.3 million cap hit. That's just a lot to ask for in exchange for a guy who's on the wrong side of 30 and who just had a hamstring injury kind of hamper his production throughout the season. So, interesting stuff. Let's talk about this though a little bit more. Let's talk about like the ifs and the what ifs, the wheres, and kind of, where could he go? Where would you want to see him go? I'm very curious for those of you watching in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys think. I'm very curious what you guys feel. So as far as like possible landing spots, I was putting together a list. I was going through some other people's lists and kind of seeing what people were saying here. So 49ers, obviously the relationship with Kyle Shanahan is there. Past history, that would probably be a very ideal scenario for Julio Jones. The Patriots, they have been rumored to have had internal discussions. Mike Giardi the other day of NFL Media reported that the Patriots did have internal discussions about Jones. He followed up with a tweet saying that the seriousness of those discussions weren't made known to him, so he's not going to speculate on it, but there was at least conversation about the whole thing. So that's kind of interesting as well. I mean, that could mean one of two things. It could have just been like hey, should we maybe trade for Julio Jones? Like, is that we have the money? Do we want to give up the capital for it? The way I see it, the Patriots are not the best at developing wide receivers, and they didn't take anyone very high in the draft at the wide receiver position. Yeah, they got Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, but I mean, are those really going to be the guys leading your receiver core going into this season? I understand the tight end position is probably going to be far more heavily featured than the last few years for New England, so maybe that's going to make up for it. But, I mean, Julio Jones catching passes, and it was quoted that Jones would be interested in catching passes from Cam Newton. So, like, there's a lot to dissect there with him potentially going in with New England, or not going with New England, but potentially being traded to New England as a good fit if the Patriots think it's a good idea in bringing him in. On top of that, some other teams, the Chargers are another one. I think that, LA they're kind of on the upswing. They just went through an entire coaching change, and that's always a tough thing to do, especially for a sophomore year quarterback. He just went through a whole system his first year. Now he has to go through an entire new system. That's always tough. What better way to kind of ease that transition than bringing in one of literally the top 2 wide receivers in the NFL for the last some odd years now that he's been playing. So I could definitely see LA. The Colts are another one. Me personally, as a Colts fan, I would be for this if the trade price was right. I'm 100% against giving up a first-round pick for Julio. I understand how good he is. Do not get me wrong. I'm just, my argument to the fact that, some wide receivers are coming right out of the draft ready to produce, and it seems to be in bigger and bigger quantities as well. I have a hard time thinking giving up a first-round pick. Pre-draft, could it have been possible? Yeah, but now post-draft, looking into next year, I don't really know if his trade value is that high anymore, because now, some teams have gotten their hopeful wide receivers of the futures. I definitely think his trade value is a little bit lower. I think like a second-round pick and maybe something else. It's like a comp pick or something. I don't know, but I would definitely like seeing him go to the Colts. We do have like Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell, and T.Y. Hilton's obviously coming back, but you can't really like replace what Julio Jones brings to the table. And then from there, Cardinals are another one. DeAndre Hopkins himself came out and basically said that he would be willing to restructure his contract if that meant bringing him in. So that's definitely something you want to look at and keep an eye on there. I could see the Cardinals doing it. Ravens were a team that I saw get brought up. This is more of like a maybe more than anything else. I don't really see it happening just because the Ravens are not a team to really pay wide receivers big money. They weren't even willing to give Juju Smith-Schuster the money he was looking for, and I think that was around like $9 million or so for the year. Julio Jones is going to be on the cap for 15.3. And I mean, again, Julio Jones is definitely, again, when healthy, Julio Jones is the best, but at 15.3 million, they weren't even willing to give Juju 9. I just don't really see if like they're going to be willing to cough up even more money, nor do I think they really have the cap space without having to make some moves and maybe hurt the roster in the process. So I don't really know about Baltimore, but it's definitely something to look at because upgrading that wide receiver core would never be a bad idea for Lamar Jackson. Then the other 2 teams that I have listed on here, and these are teams that I don't really see anywhere, but I personally think would make sense. I understand that Julio Jones wants to go to a winner, and on top of that, I think the Falcons respect that enough that you can see something similar in what the Lions did with Matthew Stafford, and they're going to take a good offer, but they're going to send him somewhere where he has a shot at winning. The Jets and the Jaguars, they have a ton of cap space. They have a young up-and-coming quarterback. Hopefully they drafted their franchise QBs of the future. So this is something that I think, what better way than to ease the process than by bringing in somebody like Julio Jones. So, again, probably not where he wants to go. The Falcons don't really owe it to, they don't owe Julio Jones anything in terms of trade. Like, yeah, he has given 10 years to them, and, he has been an all-pro for them, one of the best, if not the best wide receivers during his prime. So, I mean, again, but at the end of the day, it's a business, and if like the Jets and Jaguars offer a haul for Julio just for the possibility of completely flipping their wide receiver groups, I could definitely see something like that happening. It only helps those rookie quarterbacks coming in. I don't really know how that would go. It would be wild if like in some crazy world like Julio Jones is just like, forget that, I'm just going to retire or something. That would be insane as well. I don't think so though. He's a competitor. He's still got some fuel left in the tank, so I'd be shocked. But Jets and Jaguars are another couple of teams that I think are on the list. So those are like all the teams. I guess the Rams are another one. I saw some people mention the Rams. I don't think the Rams have the cap space for it. Like, yeah, that would be great for Matthew Stafford over there to go from having one Hall of Fame wide receiver to another Hall of Fame wide receiver, from Calvin Johnson to Julio over in LA. But I don't think the money's there. That just does not make sense to me. And on top of that, they spent a lot of draft capital trading over for Matthew Stafford. I don't know where they would get the picks unless they're literally just going to mortgage their next 5 drafts to win now. I don't really see that happening either, but I did see the Rams come up a few times. So ultimately, what do I think happens? Oh man, it's tough because I think Julio Jones ends up getting traded. I think it makes sense. They drafted Kyle Pitts in Atlanta, so he's kind of like the replacement. Everyone's kind of under the consensus that Kyle Pitts is probably the best player in this draft. Obviously Trevor Lawrence being like the guy right behind him. I think that overall Kyle Pitts is the most NFL ready player though in this draft class. I think he's going to be a fantastic tight end for the team. And so you kind of swap out like an all-pro wide receiver for what you hope is an all-pro tight end, and Calvin Ridley, who's kind of on the upswing, can play off of that as well. So I think it makes sense money-wise to trade him. You get some good draft capital for him. If you're not taking a first-round pick, you're getting a second-round pick and something else most likely. So I definitely think he gets traded. To where, I mean, realistically, who knows? It just depends on how much the Falcons are willing to budge and trade compensation. And on top of that, who's willing to buy into, he's aging. Who knows how good he's going to be when he comes back healthy, but he is an aging wide receiver. So a lot of question marks on all that. I do ultimately think, though, he does get traded post June 1st. That's when the trade has to go down for the money to make sense for Atlanta. And that'll be kind of something to watch as we get through the end of this month here and go into the early part of June. I think this is going to be a conversation we're having for at least the next week or so minimum. Staying on the topic of veterans, though, Aaron Rodgers, we'll talk about him a little bit. This was kind of a footnote thing and not really something super important, and I don't think anyone's really surprised by the development of it. Aaron Rodgers did not report to voluntary OTAs for the Green Bay Packers. They started today over in Green Bay. A few things to just note of the whole situation. Obviously, I don't think anyone is surprised by this whole situation. I did not expect Aaron Rodgers to be there in Green Bay. I don't think anyone expected Aaron Rodgers to be in Green Bay for these OTAs. Obviously, the drama has not been solved, and there is just no end in sight for this whole situation. I really think that there's a possibility we look at a trade post June 1st once the money can kind of be moved around a little bit more for Aaron, and the Packers are on the hook for less of that dead cap number, but who knows what's going to happen with the whole thing. Ultimately, both sides have been like radio silent through the whole situation. So really interesting how this has all gone. A few things of note, though. While the workouts are voluntary, Rodgers does have workout bonuses. Apparently, he's missed enough time that he's, able to lose the $500,000 bonus he has in workout bonuses. So that's big on its own. Whether Green Bay opts to take that money away from him or not remains to be seen. I feel like if you're really trying to keep Aaron Rodgers, obviously they don't owe him the money, and it's written in the contract that they don't owe him the money if he's not there. I don't think that's going to help if they start docking him pay. They got to figure out the contract situation. This is one of those things where whether Aaron Rodgers is there or not for this, if they really want to keep Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, I think Green Bay is going to have to eat that $500,000 and give it to him anyways, unless they are willing to keep the money now and pay him back later for it in his contract if they do work something out. Matt LaFleur, obviously at his rookie camp earlier this month, came out and said we want him back in the worst way. But outside of the $500,000 workout bonus that Rodgers is already looking at potentially losing, there is a lot more money to be lost. There's mandatory camp coming up June 8th through 10th. Apparently, he could lose up to $93,000 in that time, so just under $100,000. Then on top of that, he can lose about $50K per day missed of training camp once that rolls around in July. And then on top of that, he can lose 1 week of regular season pay per preseason game missed. So let's say he doesn't show up until week 1. They could realistically dock him his first 4 weeks of pay and make him play for free. This is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen as far as numbers go, because it really sounds like he has no interest in coming back to Green Bay. He's willing to lose all this money. And if Green Bay is going to dock all this money from him, I don't really see how that's going to help any of the situation. Again, they want to bring him back. Is this going to work out? I mean, I don't know. Right now, it's all voluntary stuff. So, I mean, if he's willing to give it up, or let's say if this wasn't going on and he would have missed the camp anyways, regardless, maybe this is just money he already kind of accounted for losing anyways, he wasn't going to show up for voluntary workouts. Maybe that's the case, and that whole thing doesn't really matter. But he's missing more of these. If he misses the mandatory camp, that's where the numbers start to add up and he starts to lose more and more. Things could get really ugly in Green Bay between those two sides if things don't get worked out. So I'm going to definitely keep an eye on that and see how that goes. Obviously, that's not until the second week of June, so we'll have to keep an eye on the whole Rodgers thing and see how that unfolds as we go through the early part of next month. On the topic of more players, though, this is more injury stuff. Bradley Chubb reportedly underwent a scope to remove a bone spur from his ankle. This is supposed to be a procedure that's considered very common, something that a lot of players go through just because, they get nicks and things here and there, like one of those procedural postseason surgeries that a lot of players seem to have to get. Chubb is apparently going to have to wear a boot for a couple of weeks. He's going to miss the OTAs. However, he should be ready to go, full go, nothing hindering him or anything like that going into the actual training camp once that rolls through in July. So he is expected to be fully ready to go with that. Bradley Chubb, for those of you that do not know what goes on in Denver, has missed some time here and there the last couple of years. He had a torn ACL injury coming off the 2019 season, I want to say, or 2018. He bounced back, had a pretty solid year. Last year was a pretty good year for him as well. The Broncos have opted to take his fifth-year option, so it doesn't sound like they're really concerned about injury stuff with him. The torn ACL thing has not lingered, in my opinion, so I don't think that that's really something that's in the back of their minds. Again, they picked up his fifth-year option, so I assume Bradley Chubb is going to be around, and they want to keep him around for a long time. That pairing of him and Von Miller, when both are healthy, is a pretty nasty duo at the linebacker position, rushing the passer, so definitely something that I think they want to keep going there, and they definitely don't want to lose Bradley Chubb. I think he is a star over there, and he's kind of going to be the guy that fills the role of Von Miller once he ultimately either leaves the team or retires. Beyond that, more injury news. This is a little bit late. This is like a few days old, but I'm going to want to cover it anyways because it's Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is apparently ahead of schedule following his toe surgery he underwent earlier this year. It turns out that apparently that injury was a little bit more serious than some people had initially thought. It was something that was bothering him for a while during the back half of the season. So he had the surgery, but he is ahead of schedule in his rehab, so things are looking good. It sounds like he'll be limited in OTA, so he's actually going to participate in some things. He doesn't plan on going like full go or anything like that, but he will be around. He will be doing some stuff, and then from there, they expect him to be fully ready to go by the time actual training camp rolls around in July. So no real concerns as far as the OTAs go, but it'll be something to at least keep an eye on to talk about for the NFL as we roll through the early part of this whole offseason, or the later part of this offseason, not the early part. And then one other announcement, we've already kind of touched on it here a couple times with the injury stuff and with the Aaron Rodgers story. OTAs have begun for the NFL. This is going to be going on for the next 10-ish days or so or something like that. They are all voluntary, so no player has to show up for any of these, but they are going to be going on. Fans aren't allowed access to them, but this is a cool time of year because you kind of get to start to see some of these players that, either were brought in from free agency, brought in from the draft, that sort of stuff. You start to see the clips that pop out. The social media teams on all of, from all the NFL teams and even the NFL Network, they love posting things from all of this. So definitely something that'll be fun to watch as we go through. I mean, if you are not somebody that's on Instagram or Twitter, that's where they seem to shine with these kinds of things. You'll see the guys running around in their numbers and shorts and whatnot doing things. It's like 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s, no contact or anything, but you'll at least see some stuff come out. And this seems to always happen. You get those cool off-season highlights. So keep an eye on the social media pages. You'll definitely see some things, especially if you're, if you're a real diehard football fan, you'll find some stuff on there I'm sure you're going to like. But that wraps up just about all the actual just news that's going on. Again, like I said, slow time of the year for the NFL. There's not a ton to talk about. It's just like the headline stories that pop up here and there. But I mean, we're kind of just trudging through the boring time of the offseason. I was checking in on things for fan-controlled football league. It sounds like that might be starting up again soon. It sounds like season 2 is well on its way. So if you're somebody who watches this channel and you weren't around early on when the fan-controlled football league was going on, we do cover that. So I definitely recommend to check it out, see what it's all about. It's a totally different atmosphere and world from what the regular NFL is. And for somebody like me who just loves football, I think it's a really cool alternative to just kind of, watch. And it's not something that you probably look at as serious as the NFL, but it is an interesting thing to watch. And being a part of it, because it's interactive, you can go on Twitch is where it's streamed, or on the FCF app, and kind of play a part of it. And it almost feels like real life Madden, I guess. It's really interesting. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I definitely recommend you guys check it out. I'll keep news tabs on that. But there's really nothing else going on in any of the other leagues. The FCF, college is dead right now. Spring games are going on. But other than that, there's nothing really going on worth talking about. So what I have prepared for you guys now, we will be discussing the Green Bay Packers and how they fared in the 2021 NFL Draft. This is a team I was looking forward to doing that I have not gotten around to doing up until today. So we'll just kind of dive into it, starting off with the team needs of Green Bay. I have a few things listed on this one here. It's no particular order, but it is kind of ordered by importance. The number one, I would say and it's kind of split evenly. Like the number one, number two, or 1A, 1B kind of deal is wide receiver and linebacker. Those are probably the biggest team needs that they had going into this draft here. Then from there, cornerback I have listed, D-line I have listed. Those are a little bit less pressing needs, but cornerback is probably slightly higher than the D-line there. And then the least important of them all, because Green Bay has a really strong unit, I have offensive line listed because they did lose Corey Linsley in the free agency market. He was obviously their center, so kind of a loss there. He's the guy that's in sync with the quarterback. The play starts with them, so it is kind of a loss. He directs the entire, offensive line, pass protections, run blocking, all that stuff. He basically, alerts the entire line of changes and things like that. So still kind of an important thing that they needed to look at that I have listed on there. Now, we'll run through the picks. I'll talk about the players and, I'll highlight some of them and we'll give our grade and kind of see how they fared. And I'm definitely curious to see what you guys think. Welcome to the show, William Mislet. Appreciate you for stopping by. We're talking Green Bay Packers. So round number 1, pick 29, cornerback Eric Stokes out of Georgia. This is their first pick of the draft here. Experienced press cover cornerback. He has great hands, 4 interceptions in 2020. So always a positive there. Cornerback that can catch the football. Granted, 2 were kind of overthrown straight to him. Whether you want to take that away from him or not, I'll leave that up to you. He's a very fast corner as well, 4.3 speed. Some of the knocks that came on this player here, he's not a fluid mover. He's labeled as grabby, which can be an issue, especially in the NFL, because if you're already grabby in college, the competition level only increases and gets more difficult, which then could lead to even more excessive grabbing, and then you become prone to more penalties. His instincts aren't indicative of the 2020 interceptions he had. That was something that I noted and I kind of just brought up when I was talking about the 4 picks he had. He had none the 2 seasons prior, and people were saying that because 2 of those interceptions were overthrows that kind of went straight to him, can you really give him credit for all 4 of the picks? I say yes to an extent because you're not necessarily ready for that kind of stuff. That stuff doesn't just happen. There is, a little bit of cause for concern, but, I think overall he's a solid cornerback. I think he's really good. I'm not a fan of the pick though. I'm just going to start that out and say that there. To be completely honest with you guys, I am among the people that really thought Green Bay, if they wanted to make things work with Aaron Rodgers, they needed to go after a wide receiver in this draft. I have made it very clear I am not a fan of the Love pick from last year for Green Bay. They really needed to, if they really wanted to appease and show that Aaron Rodgers, hey, we're really trying to work around you and build around you, they needed to commit to a high pick that went to the wide receiver position. So I don't like the pick. I don't think it's great. Cornerback is not the highest need that they have, but it was a somewhat high need on the team. But there's just between that and linebacker, those, in my opinion, prioritized over corner, and I'm just surprised that they went corner in the first round. Going into round number 2, pick 62, they took center Josh Myers out of Ohio State. This is a pick that, I think it's a team need. And again, I address the center position as kind of not the most important need that they have because their offensive line together as a whole is really good. But it is pretty important of a position because it runs the rest of the entire unit there. But he offers good athleticism. Some say he could even, if he ends up not starting there, he could even switch over to guard, something like that. He has the athleticism for it. He's really good at getting to the second level, and he's not afraid to pancake people. He's a kind of an aggressive guy once he gets up to that second level there. I, however, have labeled this as a reach. A lot of people considered him a day 3 pick. He was graded at the lowest that I saw. Some places had him in round 5. So that's a day 3 pick. Definitely somebody that they could have waited on grabbing. A lot of people were saying that he wasn't even the best center on the board when they drafted him. Quinn Miners was there, and a lot of people were higher on him, even though he played at a smaller school against lower competition, just his overall physical traits and the kind of player he was. People all agreed that Miners was a better option there. So, again, I'm not a big fan of the pick. This is a reach. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I understand, yes, they needed center, and I'm even saying, yeah, you needed a center, but you could have waited for you could have waited for Myers. So, a reach of a pick. I don't think it was the best option for them in the second round. Again, there was some wide receivers you probably could have gone after, somebody that could have been at least a strong number 2 target beside Devontae Adams if you weren't going to go wide receiver in round number 1. Going into round number 3, Finally, we get some wide receiver addressing here. They go after Clemson wide receiver Amari Rodgers. I think this will be good. He might be limited to just being a slot guy, but I mean, he's really great after the catch, super strong legs, kind of hard to take down. He has very good straight line speed, so, a guy that can run the seams really quickly. Separation issues are probably the biggest concerns that I found when I was going through the scouting reports on him, especially with like underneath and intermediate routes. And he doesn't have a ton of contested catch wins. For somebody who caught so many passes from Trevor Lawrence during Trevor Lawrence's time there, he was not in a lot of situations winning contested catches. He only won 5 out of the 17 he found himself in through college, which was a little bit surprising to me because I feel like I was hearing Amari Rodgers' name a lot. And so when I actually went back and looked at it and I found the numbers, I was a little bit surprised to see this. So that'll be something of a question as well. Can he win those big-time catches and be a difference maker for the offense? Now, going into the later days of the round, this is the meat and the potatoes of the draft. In round number 4, at pick 142, they took tackle Royce Newman out of Ole Miss. He had some solid games against Alabama, Florida, Auburn, and I stress the word solid. On top of that, he started at guard and tackle, so a multifaceted offensive lineman, something you definitely want to look for when you're drafting a lineman late is, how versatile can he be for my team? On top of that, above average footwork, reaction time's pretty good. This is he's a project guy. I mean, I think, there's some things about his game that stand out on tape. He's I appreciate you for stopping by, William, but he's a project player. He's a victim of the bull rush. He's gotten, almost run over a lot by a lot of people. And on top of that, he gets stood up a lot and he plays a little high. So again, a project player. He's a late round guy. I'm glad that they're going after the offensive line because they do have some guys that are getting close to the ends of their contracts that are going to cost a lot of money to replace. And if they're really trying to keep Aaron Rodgers, you're going to assume that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to command some more money. So, things to think about, for the future. I like the pick to an extent. I think it's fine. Then in round number 5, they addressed the Dean line. They got Terrell Sutton out of Florida. This is like a high upside player pick that they have here. Huge size. The dude's 6'5", 340 pounds, really good frame, explosive first step. And on top of that, he's really, really strong driving players. He can really, move an offensive lineman from his grounding. And on top of that, he has a club of an arm. So he's really, not afraid to really swing and, swing for the fences, so to say, I guess is the best way to put that there. He has had some weight concerns and the motor's inconsistent. So while he's very, very strong and powerful and he can drive a lineman, when you look at his tape, he's a little inconsistent. Some plays he's driving, other plays he looks like he's tired. So, and I think that's more of just like the whole weight concern issues and the conditioning issues. That's something that'll have to be, kept track of as he progresses through the first few years of his NFL career. I think it's a good pick. This is more of like a high upside, low production guy. I don't want to say it's a bad pick. I want to say it's a pretty good pick. You get somebody who could potentially be really good. He didn't produce the numbers at Florida that you would have expected, but he ended up being, a really good guy to be taking in the 5th round there where there's so much upside if he learns how to, if he learns the techniques and, they have guys like Kenny Clark, so there's good people to learn behind. And I think he's a really good project player for them. In round number 5 at pick 178, you have cornerback Shamar Jean-Charles. He's from Appalachian State. He only allowed 17 out of 52 catches this past season. So that's really good, really sticky corner, a guy who can stay on his man and break up the passes. 25 PBUs and 2 ints in the last 2 seasons. So that's really good as well. PBUs are pass breakups, ints, interceptions, in case you didn't know. And on top of that, he's really good at reading the quarterback and wide receivers and kind of like that unspoken conversation that they have on the field, putting him in a good position to break up plays. This is another, I think, good late round pick. The biggest knock really was that he's not the most physical corner and the competition level he went up against is low. So that might expose him once he makes it to this next level in the NFL. But he did his job and he did his job really well against, the competition he had put up against him. It's not really his choice who he's playing. So ultimately, whether he ends up being effective at the next level and he can take some of the ability he brought at that college level into the NFL remains to be seen. But again, I think another guy that he's shown the promise, he shows he has the ability and he understands what he needs to be doing. It's just, can he take it to that next level and play against some of those wide receivers from the NFL? This is actually a round 6 pick. We have tackle Cole Van Lenin from Wisconsin. This is just a project player. again, in the later rounds, you're looking for people that probably aren't going to start. They're going to be guys that you work with. I think it's a solid pick. I don't want to say it's a bad pick. Solid pick, late round tackle, a guy that you can hopefully develop. And should anything crazy happen with some of your, better offensive linemen you have starting now when their contracts are up, you have somebody hopefully waiting in the wings that can plug into that spot and at least take their place and be effective until they find a replacement if he's not the guy, or he ends up becoming the replacement if he is the guy. Another round 6 pick at 220, linebacker Isaiah McDuffie out of Boston College. This guy has a really great motor, very awesome work ethic. So this is somebody that I think will be really good for them, especially depth-wise. Not afraid to deliver the big hit, and he keeps going back for it. He's very gritty. He's a little bit on the smaller side, but we've talked about this a lot in some of the draft grade videos. The linebackers in the NFL appear to be becoming smaller and smaller to make up for how fast these, the tight ends and wide receivers are becoming. The big old 6'5", 250-pound linebacker is kind of a thing of the past. You don't really get those too much anymore. And when you look at guys like Darius Leonard, who's, he's like 6'2", 6'3", he played around like the 220 mark himself, and Isaiah McDuffie is, I believe, 6'1", 220 something. So, around the same size, roughly, maybe a little bit shorter, but around same size weight-wise. He's not the best in coverage, so that'll be something that you'll have to work on, because if you're going to be one of those smaller backers, you need to be good in coverage. That's kind of how that whole thing translates. If you're not going to be the big thumping linebacker, you got to be the cover linebacker who can stay on, the tight ends that are moving inside the field, or those slot wide receivers, and at least being able to hold them up for a few seconds. Then, to cap off their draft, round 7, pick 256, running back Kylan Hill out of Mississippi State. This guy, I think, is going to be a really good pick for them. This is a really good depth at the running back position. Great size, violent. He's a steamroller type of guy. He's not afraid to jump over a defender and actually get and jump the defender. That's the thing, is there are players who are not afraid to jump defenders, but they aren't able to do it. He's a guy that can jump, who's not afraid and can actually jump the defender. And on top of that, the dude can carry the rock. Not a single fumble since his sophomore year of high school. That is quite a stat right there when I was doing my homework on him. Not a single fumble since his sophomore year of high school. So you're talking about a guy that can carry the rock and, keep it protected. You can trust him with the football in his hand. Some of the knocks on him were his lack of patience. That could be an issue in the NFL. In the NFL, you sometimes have to wait a little bit more for things to develop because, the athleticism and everything is just so much higher. It takes a little bit more for things to kind of shape up inside the tackles when you're waiting for those big runs. On top of that, he struggled against some of the bigger teams. So people are concerned that, he was more of like a guy that was just chomping on the little teams, but then not showing up against the bigger teams. He struggled against LSU, Bama, and Auburn. And he has very average hands for somebody who was running like intermediate routes and was having targets sent his way while he was playing in Mississippi State. So he has some good upside. I think this is a really good late round pick for them, just adding depth to the running back room. You never know with the running back position how long people are going to last. So I think having, depth in the backfield of just a strong rotation is always a good thing. The running back position seems like you get like a 4 or 5 year lifespan out of guys these days. So, or at least the coaches seem to think so and teams seem to think so. That's the way the turnover seems to be. Now, for my overall grade, I put a lot of thought into this one here because I'm very unhappy with some of the early picks, but then I think some of the later picks, they got like really solid project guys, and they filled the team holes that they had. They added some depth at positions they needed. But I feel like the early round picks, they have more weight to them, obviously. So it's going to affect the grade on this one. I'm going to give them a C+. I think that's better than what I've seen some others grade them. I've seen grades as low as a D- for the Packers. I don't think it was that bad of a draft class for them. It was more so they just didn't go after what people wanted them to go after. So that's why I think some people gave them those grades. But I think they got a solid C+. While they didn't get what everyone wanted them to go after, they went after some solid players. They did have some reaches. The Myers pick in the second round, I mean, man, he was graded low in some places. And so curious to see how that works out for them. But, I think it's not too high, not too low. It's right in the middle, C+. I'm happy with that grade. I think that works well for them. I would definitely like to know what you guys think in the comments down below. So please let me know what you guys think of how the Green Bay Packers end. And Packers fans, if you hate me for this one, I'm sorry, but that's just kind of how I look at your draft class. But that is the show. That is everything I have prepared for you guys today. It's good to be back. Took a week off with bunch of crazy things going on in my life, so it was nice to get back on the camera. I had a little bit of a fumble at the beginning of the show, but we got things going. So question of the day, one more time, running it back to you guys, the big headline news of the day. What team would benefit most from Julio Jones' services? Where do you think he's going to go? Who do you think is going to go after him? Would definitely love to see what you guys think. Remember to check us out on all of our socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're all over the place on there. I post things all the time depending on what's going on and, anything that interests me, whatever it may be. So definitely check those out. Follow us on there. I also post when the show is going live. So if you don't have the notification button clicked here on YouTube, we always remind you up on the socials as well. With that, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. I am Ethan Hristodoulou. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, and I'll catch you guys next time.